Pass, where the Texas highway curves dangerously close to cartel-controlled territory. That's when the officer noticed something odd. A pickup parked awkwardly on the shoulder, its driver nervous and refusing to open her truck.
And she's got them in the back of the truck. And the truck is locked.
The woman said she was just visiting family. She'd driven up from Houston to pick up the mattresses from a friend. But when the officer knocked on the truck bed, he heard something, a soft thud, then silence, and that's when he pried it open. Beneath the mattresses, wedged into the tiny, airless space, were 12 children, between several more adults. To say the place was cramped would be a grave. Texas state troopers pulled over a battered pickup on a hot afternoon after noticing it driving oddly on the highway. The truck looked ordinary at first, but the officers decided to check the bed. When they opened the locked compartment, they found children pressed together inside, breathing hard and looking terrified. It was a shocking moment. These children had been hidden in a confined space with almost no air and no way out. The officers reacted instantly, calling for medical help and alerting child protection services while securing the scene for investigation. The children were removed from the truck carefully and given water and blankets. Some were too frightened to speak, others appeared exhausted, and a few were in visible shock. Medical teams checked each one for dehydration, heat exhaustion, and injuries. Early reports suggested no severe trauma, but the psychological impact was impossible to ignore. Officers spoke gently to them, trying to ease their fear, while social workers began asking simple questions to learn their names, ages, and whether they knew where they were. Attention then shifted to the driver and the people in the cab. Their stories did not match, and none of them could give a clear explanation for why the children were locked away. Officers found signs that the vehicle and its occupants were connected to a smuggling operation. The driver was arrested on suspicion of human smuggling, and the truck was seized as evidence. Law enforcement made it clear that while the first priority was to ensure the children's safety, serious criminal charges would follow as the investigation unfolded. Cases involving children often lead to the involvement of multiple agencies. This situation quickly drew attention from local police, state troopers, border patrol, and federal investigators. The truck was inspected for hidden compartments and any modifications that could indicate repeated use for smuggling. Officers also began looking at communication devices, travel routes, and other evidence that could reveal whether this was part of a larger criminal network. Rumors began circulating almost immediately that the smuggling could be tied to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, also known as CJNG. This cartel is one of the most powerful in Mexico and is known for violent operations, including drug trafficking and other illegal activities. However, officials refused to confirm such a link without concrete proof. They explained that any cartel involvement would require evidence such as direct communication with cartel members, financial records, or witness statements. At the same time, they acknowledged that cartels are often involved in human smuggling and that organized crime networks frequently work across both sides of the border. Local residents who witnessed the scene were shaken. Many described hearing the children's cries and watching as officers worked under the intense sun to get them out. Some neighbors stepped in to help, offering water, blankets, and toys. Charities and nonprofits prepared to assist with temporary housing and care. Officials praised the community for its compassion, but reminded everyone that these cases often require longer-term solutions, including finding safe, legal guardians for the children or placing them in protective care. Investigators considered several possible scenarios. In some cases, children are smuggled for profit by organized crime groups. In others, parents or relatives pay smugglers to move children across dangerous routes. There are also instances where children are transported for forced labor or exploitation. Determining which of these applied here was a top priority for law enforcement and child protection officials. They stressed that a full understanding of the case would come only after thorough interviews and forensic analysis. Bad cover story, but when officers finally got it open, they found children, barely alive. Some were too weak to cry. The woman behind the wheel drove up from Houston and told police she was just there to pick up a mattress. But her phone told a different story. It wasn't just one truck. There was a convoy on an infamous smuggling route, and according to what ICE told the press that day, it's all linked to El Mencho's dreadful cartel. This is how the CJNG is now using children as shields, and the story's about to get much darker before we unpack everything. The mention of CJNG raised concern because the cartel is notorious for its reach and brutality. CJNG has been tied to trafficking in narcotics, weapons, and, in some reports, people. However, investigators were careful to remind the public that the presence of smuggling does not automatically mean cartel involvement. Smaller criminal groups sometimes act independently or work loosely with larger networks. The structure of these operations can be complex, with multiple layers between those carrying out the smuggling and any higher-level criminal organization. Federal prosecutors were soon briefed on the case. Human smuggling involving minors is a federal crime with severe penalties. If cartel involvement was proven, the case could escalate into an international investigation. Prosecutors have, in past cases, worked with foreign governments to dismantle smuggling networks, which often involves months of coordinated work. For now, officials were focused on preserving every piece of evidence and ensuring that the children's rights were protected during the process. Media coverage was intense, but law enforcement provided limited details in the early stages. They explained that revealing too much too soon could compromise the investigation. Reporters described the challenge of balancing public demand for answers with the need to protect both the investigation and the minors involved. Social media posts fueled speculation, which authorities warned could harm the case or mislead the public. They urged anyone with legitimate information about the truck, its route, or its occupants to contact investigators directly. Advocates for child welfare used the case to highlight the dangers children face when caught in smuggling networks. They warned that even if a child is not physically harmed, the emotional trauma can be long-lasting. These groups called for trauma-informed care, proper schooling, language support, and legal representation for the minors. They also stressed that without long-term support, children rescued from such situations can remain vulnerable to exploitation. Elected officials reacted with strong statements. Some pushed for stricter border enforcement and harsher punishments for smugglers who endanger children. Others argued for more humane immigration policies that could reduce the demand for smuggling by offering safer, legal pathways. The sight of children locked in a truck bed reignited debates over how to balance security with compassion. As the investigation progressed, detectives worked on reconstructing the truck's journey. They reviewed traffic camera footage, highway toll records, and checkpoint logs. They also analyzed phone data and vehicle records to determine who coordinated the trip. Forensic experts examined the truck for clues, such as fingerprints, tool marks, or hidden storage compartments. If patterns emerged that matched known smuggling methods, the case could be linked to other incidents. Officers also compared the evidence to ongoing investigations in other states to see if this operation was part of a wider network. Clinging to each other, others curled into corners with their shirts pulled over their faces.
Can you get EMS this way? We got young kids too.
One of the kids didn't respond when pulled out. They had to radio for EMS. The officers on the scene, the driver faced immediate charges of human smuggling and child endangerment. In court, prosecutors presented body camera footage, officer reports, and witness statements. The defense argued that the facts were not yet fully clear and that their client deserved due process. The judge made decisions about bail while ensuring that the children's identities and privacy were protected. Guardians were appointed for the minors, and their living arrangements were placed under court supervision. For the children, the future remained uncertain. Some might be reunited with family members after verification of their safety. Others could be placed in foster care or under federal custody, especially if there were signs of exploitation or if no safe family could be found, and their phone numbers were cross-referenced with numbers linked to known CJNG operatives. Analysts began examining encrypted messaging apps on the suspects' devices, looking for keywords or codes that could tie this trip to a larger smuggling chain. Forensic specialists also inspected the pickup truck more thoroughly. They examined the welding work on the hidden compartment and compared it to photographs from other seized vehicles. In smuggling circles, certain methods of building false walls or hidden air vents are as distinctive as a signature, often pointing to specific smuggler workshops used repeatedly by the same network. Investigators discovered that the lock on the compartment had been reinforced and modified with parts that were not standard for that truck model, which suggested professional work rather than a makeshift job.
Migrants are found crammed into a box truck during a routine crash investigation. This happened last week at a truck stop along I-37 near George West. Troopers there found men, women, and an 11-year-old child hidden inside a crawl space behind mattresses with no ventilation. All were medically evaluated and turned over to Border Patrol.
Meanwhile, financial investigators began tracking the suspects' bank accounts, cash deposits, and wire transfers. Suspicious transactions were flagged, including deposits that matched amounts commonly paid by families to smugglers. Some of these deposits had been sent from outside the United States, raising questions about coordination between multiple countries. Agents suspected that these payments could have been funneled through intermediaries to hide the final recipient, a tactic frequently used by cartel-affiliated networks. Interviews with the children were handled with extreme care by trained specialists. Some children could only give partial accounts of their journey, while others described being passed from one adult to another across multiple locations. These fragmented accounts were pieced together with GPS data from the truck and toll road logs to build a timeline of their movement. The hope was that by reconstructing the route, authorities could identify other suspects, stash houses, or accomplices who had handled the children along the way. Officials remained cautious about making any public statements on cartel involvement, but inside the investigation teams, there was growing concern that the case was not isolated. Patterns were emerging that mirrored previous operations dismantled by federal agents in Texas and Arizona. If those suspicions proved correct, this rescue could be the first visible crack in a much larger smuggling pipeline that had been running for years. Advocates called for careful placement decisions to avoid further trauma. They also reminded the public of past tragedies in which smuggling victims died in sealed compartments or from heat exhaustion, stressing that prevention is just as important as rescue. Weeks later, the investigation continued. Authorities interviewed suspects, examined digital evidence, and coordinated with other states and countries as needed. Updates to the public remained cautious. Officials confirmed that the children were receiving care and that the suspects remained in custody, but they did not provide specifics about possible cartel ties. Public interest stayed high, and the case continued to fuel conversations about preventing similar situations in the future. The community that had come together on the day of the rescue kept showing support. Volunteers and local organizations raised funds for counseling, legal assistance, and other needs. The incident became a symbol of both the dangers of smuggling and the capacity for people to help in moments of crisis. For the officers involved, it was a powerful reminder of why vigilance matters and how quickly a routine traffic stop can turn into a life-saving mission. Authorities closed their statements by asking for patience. They explained that complex cases like this require time to unravel and that speculation can make the job harder. They promised that justice would be pursued and that the children's safety would remain the top priority. Whether the crime was part of a massive cartel operation or the work of a smaller smuggling crew, the shock of finding children locked in a truck bed left a lasting impression on everyone who saw it. It served as a reminder that behind the statistics and headlines are real lives that need protection. It also left a clear message that vigilance, compassion, and cooperation between communities and law enforcement are essential to fighting the kind of crimes that treat children as cargo instead of human beings. As the days passed, the focus of the investigation began to shift toward uncovering any possible cartel connections. Federal agents specializing in organized crime joined the case, bringing with them databases of known smuggling patterns, suspect profiles, and intercepted communications from previous operations. The names of the arrested suspects were run through these systems,